All right, boys and girls, Miss Carpenter, and we're back to chapter 16, the final chapter of I Survived the Eruption of Mount St. Helens. 2 months later, Sunday, July 20th, 1980, Seattle, Washington. Jess was cleaning up her room. She checked the clock. 10 o'clock, better hurry. She and Mom were having visitors today, and they'd been working nonstop all weekend to get the apartment ready. They'd been in their new place for only a week, but already they were unpacked. Jess loved her new room, which was bright and sunny. She was still getting used to the Seattle noises and the crowds of people, but she liked it here more than she expected to. She moved carefully. The burn on her back still hurt if she turned too suddenly, but it had healed well. She was glad she couldn't see what it looked like. Mom popped her head in through the doorway. "Let's not forget our camera," Mom said. "I have it ready," Jess said. Their new camera. Jess had finally worked up the courage to tell Mom the whole story about losing Dad's camera. "It was Dad's prized possession," Jess had said, fighting back tears. Mom had put her arms around her. "No," she said, "you were Dad's prized possession." Mom looked around Jess's room now and smiled. "It looks great in here," she said. Jess agreed. The walls were covered with photographs of trees and birds and of Mom, pictures that Dad had taken. His dream had been for his photographs to hang in a Seattle gallery, and now that dream had come true. Almost. "And I really do love the red," Mom said, admiring the freshly painted walls. Jess loved the color. She knew that for the rest of her life, red would be her lucky color. Dr. Morales had helped them paint the room. Jess was glad to see that their friend was starting to smile again. He'd been safe at his lab here in Seattle when St. Helens erupted, but like many of the scientists, he blamed himself for not being able to better predict the eruption. And he'd lost one of his close friends, a young scientist who had been near the mountain when it exploded. The man was one of the 57 people who died in the eruption. Some people were killed instantly in the pyroclastic surge and blast of rock and ash. Others died in the floods and mudslides that raced down the mountain in the hours afterwards. Dr. Morales had been right when he predicted that Mount St. Helens would erupt with terrible violence, but not even he had imagined just how powerful the eruption would be. It was one of the most powerful in history, more explosive than even Pele. The entire front of the mountain shattered. Millions of tons of rock and ice and volcanic debris crashed down the mountain. The pyroclastic surge instantly destroyed everything within its 5-mile path. If Jess and the twins had been much closer, they would not have escaped with their lives. A mudslide swept down the mountain, picking up trees and logs and trucks and houses and bridges. The downtown of Cedar was spared, but some people lost their homes, including Missy. She and her family were with relatives in Iowa now. Jess was thinking about writing to her. She wanted to tell Missy the news, that skeleton woman really did exist, in a way. Jess had discovered this about a month after the eruption. By then, Jess's burn had mostly healed. She and her mom had been helping serve meals at a shelter for people who had lost their homes. There was another volunteer working that day, an older woman with a long gray braid and bright blue eyes. "I know you," the woman had said to Jess with a smile. And Jess remembered. She was the woman with the white pickup who they'd seen in the Loomis Lake parking lot the day of the first earthquake. Her name was Gretchen Livingston. She worked for a group that had been trying to save the big old trees near Loomis Lake. Gretchen and Mom had hit it off, and a few nights later at Clive's, Gretchen had told Mom and Jess her secret, that she was Skeleton Woman. "What?" Jess had gasped. Gretchen smiled slyly. "For years, our group had been trying to find ways to stop the lumber company from chopping down those beautiful old trees. But nothing we did worked. And finally, the company was going to cut them all down. I was ready to give up. But one day, I was at a restaurant over in Cougar. That was a town across the valley. I overheard some loggers in the booth behind me. They were talking about the old skeleton woman legend. Of course, I'd heard that story when I was a kid." "Me too," Mom said. The men were spooked by the story. I guess the old witch was supposed to live near Loomis Lake and that old growth forest right where they were supposed to be cutting. She leaned forward. That gave me an idea. She found out when the cutting of the trees was set to begin, and she snuck up to that part of the forest. She went into the shack and waited. I got my hair all wild, and I splattered some red paint all over my clothes. I saw that paint in the shack, Jess said. As the men were getting their chainsaws ready, I burst out of the cabin. I dashed through the forest very quickly so they would catch just a glimpse of me. She smiled proudly, and that did it. They wouldn't go back. That's when it dawned on Jess. So you're the one who found my camera in the cabin. Ah, that was your camera? I couldn't imagine who would have left it there. We were looking for Skeleton Woman. Well, you found her, Gretchen replied. They all laughed. Then Gretchen got tears in her eyes. But of course the forest is gone now. Not even Skeleton Woman could stop St. Helens from destroying it all. 230 miles of wilderness had been burned, ripped apart, or buried under 100 feet of mud and debris. Millions of trees were killed by the burning wind. The forest will grow back one day, Mom had said in her usual hopeful way. Nature has an amazing power to heal itself. Dr. Morales had told them that, and it was true. The trees would grow back, the animals would return, but it would take decades. And Jess wasn't sure she ever wanted to go back. She wanted to remember her beautiful mountain the way it had been. It was only a few weeks after that talk that Mom had decided that she was finally ready to move to Seattle. She wanted to go back to college to become a teacher. She wanted Jess to discover life outside of Cedar. Mr. Rowan had offered to buy Clive's. He'd been badly hurt in the eruption and didn't want to go back to work at his regular job. Mr. and Mrs. Rowan would run the restaurant, and of course the twins would help, so in a way Clive's would stay in the Marlowe family. Jess's throat tightened up as she thought of the twins. She would never forget those terrifying hours after they were rescued from the forest. The boys had been flown to a special hospital in Portland, Oregon, where they stayed for weeks. When they finally got home, Jess slept on the floor of their room every night until they were strong again. Jess still wasn't used to not seeing them every day, but when she closed her eyes, she could hear their happy, bickering voices. When she felt lonely, she could feel their hands gripping hers in that secret handshake. She'd spoken to them every day since the move, and today the whole Rowan family was coming to visit. Jess and Mom had a big surprise for the twins, an actual Mariners game. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Jess rushed into the door. She flung it open, and there they were, Sam and Eddie. Two buzz-cut heads, four smiling green eyes, and 10,000 freckles. Four strong arms grabbed hold of her. Three hearts pounded with happiness. It was a long time before they let each other go. Now, that's the end of the book, but I was going to read some of these questions and answers about the actual eruption of Mount St. Helens. And the author said, "Why did I write the eruption about the eruption of Mount St. Helens?" And she stated, "The eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980 was one of the most environmentally destructive in world history. It was the most powerful natural disaster ever recorded in America, more powerful than Hurricane Katrina in 2005 or the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. And yet many people under the age of 30 have barely even heard of it. How can that be? We tend to remember disasters that result in large numbers of human deaths. The St. Helens eruption destroyed 230 miles of wilderness, but because the mountain was surrounded by mostly forest, it claimed far fewer lives than many other destructive volcanoes. 57 people died in St. Helens. More famous volcanoes like Vesuvius and Krakatoa killed tens of thousands. But the eruption of St. Helens was very important, and not just because it happened right here in the United States. It was the first volcano that scientists could study closely while it was revving up for its eruption. Today, volcano scientists, called volcanologists, have a much better understanding of volcanoes than they did in 1980, and that is because of the lessons learned from St. Helens. What happened when St. Helens erupted? On the morning of May 18th, Mount St. Helens erupted with the force of 1 megaton nuclear bomb, which is equal to 10 million tons of dynamite. The front of the mountain actually shattered apart and collapsed with rocks tumbling down the mountain and a massive avalanche. The explosion created a cloud of ash, smoke, and gas that shot more than 12 miles up into the air. It triggered one of the history's biggest landslides. It was 50 miles wide. The wave of mud and debris and melted ice raced down the mountain and swept away bridges, thousands of trees, logs, cars, houses, bulldozers, and roads. The eruption spewed a staggering amount of ash, 520 million tons of it. And the ash blew eastward across the United States. In the city of Spokane, Washington, 350 miles away, the ash caused complete darkness. As far away as Montana, ash from St. Helens ruined crops, caused car accidents, and clogged airplane engines. Did the eruption really take people by surprise? Yes, the eruption was a surprise, and to me, that was the most incredible part of the story. There were so many warning signs, thousands of earthquakes, thousands, yes, thousands, between March 20th and the eruption of May 18th. There were dozens of steam explosions, some that lasted hours. Huge cracks formed in the mountain. Near the summit, the mountain was actually bulging out from the pressure. Excuse me. Just 2 years later, two scientists wrote a research paper warning that St. Helens was likely to erupt in the coming years. And yet, the eruption on the morning of May 18th was a true surprise, even to scientists. The mountain had quieted down in the weeks before. Most scientists had thought there would be some very dramatic warning before it exploded, but that warning never came. One minute the mountain was peaceful, and the next it erupted with a violence that few have imagined. Are scientists better able to predict eruptions today? Yes. Today, scientists have far better tools for studying volcanoes. They have computer programs that can analyze huge amounts of data in seconds. They have lasers that can detect whether melted rock magma is rising up through the volcano. But what truly changed volcano science was the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Scientists from all around the world have studied every second of that eruption. This work has helped scientists better understanding the warning signs that often lead to volcanic eruptions. Could St. Helens erupt again? Yes. In fact, it already has many times since 1980. Some of the eruptions have released huge clouds of ash into the sky. In 2004, it spewed 26 billion gallons of lava. How did they measure that? I wish I knew, but none has come close to the fury of the 1980 eruption. What are the world's most dangerous volcanoes? There are 1,500 volcanoes in the world that could be active, from the lava-spewing Kalawa of Hawaii to the steaming Katla of Iceland to the quietly beautiful Mount Fuji in Japan. About 160 of these world's most active volcanoes are located in a horseshoe-shaped area around the Pacific Ocean. The area is called the Ring of Fire. The Cascade Mountain Range, where St. Helens is located, is part of this ring. Any active volcano is dangerous, but what makes a volcano perilous to humans is mainly its location. Volcanoes located near big cities are far more dangerous than those in remote areas. The eruption of Mount St. Helens could have killed thousands if it had been located near a more crowded area. And here are some more intriguing facts about Mount St. Helens. The height of the eruption cloud. The main volcanic cloud rose to be between 12 to 15 miles in the air into the Earth's stratosphere. The number of earthquakes before the eruption, more than 2,000. How much area was destroyed by the eruption? About 230 square miles, which is more than 3 times the size of our national capital, Washington, D.C. What was the size of a landslide? 23 square miles. The depth of the landslide? Roughly 100 feet. The speed of the landslide? 70 to 150 miles per hour. The distance traveled by an ash cloud? Ash could have circled the globe 3 times. A small amount of ash fell over 22,200 square miles. The height of Mount St. Helens before the eruption, 9,677 feet. It was the fifth tallest mountain in the Cascades. The height after the eruption, 8,363 feet. It is now the 14th tallest. So it went from being the fifth tallest to the 14th tallest. Number of bridges that it destroyed, 27. Miles of highway destroyed, 85. Number of trees destroyed, roughly 3 million. And that's it, boys and girls. Now, if you like this book, let me know, and I'll be glad to be reading some more I Survived books. Or if there's a topic you would like for me to read about, please let your teacher know, or please let me know. I'll be glad to read any of these. So I hope you guys are having a great day. It's a beautiful day to get outside and play outside today. So, all right, see you guys next time. Bye.